So let's take a look at some other options, some other ways that we will work things. I'm going to look at LUTs. Okay, so we have this shot here. I might have one of LUTs that I like better here. I think I like this one better. So this was Shanghai, and this was shot flat. This was shot with Sony S-Log2. And I did this because I wanted to get more dynamic range between the blacks and the sky. I do want to point out that people say, oh, I'm going to shoot everything log because then I'll get much better dynamic range. If you're inside and you're lighting and you have full control and the bright areas and the dark areas are not that far apart, don't shoot it log. You don't need to. It's just going to make more work for you. Sometimes just regular shooting is fine. It's really only when you have extreme darks or extreme lights and you want to be able to recover some of the detail in your highlights or detail in your shadows. So I have this clip. I'm going to go back to my default setting for color. I have my Lumetri panel. Let me go ahead and make it look like everybody else's because I dragged it across. Reset to our saved layout. And the first thing I'm going to do, because I know that I shot this flat, is I'm going to apply a lookup table. And there are lookup tables that the manufacturer puts out. There's lookup tables that you can buy. There's free lookup tables. Just Google lookup tables for whatever your camera is. And I guarantee you will find more than you can ever imagine. Some of them bring it back to neutral. Other ones will give it a stylistic look. But what it will do, it'll take the math that Sony, in this case, it's a Sony camera, used to crush it and make it look like really bland. It's low contrast, it's low saturation, and it'll bring it all back, okay? And then I can start correcting. So underneath basic corrections, if I go to input LUTs, there are several available by default. So if you're using, say, an Alexa, or you're shooting with an Arri camera or the Phantom, Premiere has put in some of these as defaults. And you can just select them if you're using one of these. And it takes it, by the way, to something called Rec 709. Rec 709 is the color space standard for high-definition television. Okay? So now you can, again, be popular at parties by dropping that term, and people will say, wow, what does he know? So I don't have what I need. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit Browse because I have a LUT that I like. Okay, and this is a dot cube. And as a matter of fact, you can even make LUTs. In Premiere, I could color correct something and save it as a look that I could apply across, or even in Photoshop or in other programs such as, DaVinci. But I have one here that kind of works, that I like. I'm going to select it, I hit Open, and it immediately applied that LUT to this clip. Okay? I'm going to go ahead, hit my 3 button. Remember I programmed it? Without the LUT, with the LUT. Okay? So it's already pretty close to good. Before, after. Let's look at that with our scopes. So we have our scopes. We should have our scopes. There we go. So selected. You can see low contrast, not a lot of color. With the LUT, more color, wider dynamic range. Didn't catch everything, so even though I put a LUT on here, I may want to go ahead and tweak this a little bit. I'm not really taking advantage of how bright this could be. I'm going to move up the exposure instead of starting with the white and the black because I want most of this mid area to be in the mid area. It's a little bit low, so I want to get my exposure good first, and then I can stretch it out with my whites, darks, highlights, and shadows. So I bring that up a little bit. My blacks, I want them to touch the bottom. And you can see if you go crazy, do you see how I'm getting a hard line there? My blacks are getting crushed. I'm losing a lot of detail. So you just want it to barely touch so you have that rich look. My highlights are actually pretty good. I don't really need it to hit 100. Little pieces are. If I go ahead and I make the whites too bright, it's just, again, I'm going to lose some of the saturation. It's not going to necessarily be the best look here. So I'm going to keep it there. And I'm going to bring my highlights down just again so I have a little more detail. And I might want this to punch a little bit more. This is probably really how it looked. But remember, we're creating a perception. So I'll go down to the creative, and I want you to see the difference between upping the saturation and upping the vibrance. So if I bring the saturation up, everything gets really bright. Now, I'm not so far that I'm actually going into an area where it's just like oversaturated, but it's starting to look a little Disney. It's starting to look a little bit artificial. So the saturation is not necessarily the solution that I want, but I want some of the muted areas to have more color, so I use vibrance. And as I bring vibrance up, the city looks more interesting. It looks more real because the muted colors have been brightened, but it doesn't look fake yet. And once again, always look at the before and then at the after. And I want you to look at my scopes too. Okay? Scopes are really filling things nicely. I don't want to blow out the sky. I do have a little peak there. That's good. And look at how much more color I have in my vector scope. And the other thing you'll notice is this is a fairly central blob. I have all my colors here. Okay? So I can go ahead and work with that. Now, if I wanted to, I could even take it to a little more detail. And that's going to introduce the next area. And the next area is called curves. I just jumped from creative to curves. And this gives me a lot of control. A lot of photographers are used to working with curves. And this allows me to be very specific in different ranges of luminance to control how saturated or how bright parts of the image are. So if I clicked here where it's white, it's going to create a little dot. And I could go ahead and I could bring that down, making a little bit of a bent line. And do you see those shadows areas are getting a little bit darker? Okay, so it's giving me a little bit of a richer look. And then this is called an S-curve. I could go up to the top area, put another little dot in there, a little keyframe, and I just want to be able to open up the top a little bit and take a look at what happens to my waveform. I'm actually able to expand my dynamic range a little bit with this S-curve. I can toggle any one of these on and off. So I can toggle off individual panel corrections if I wanted to, not just all of them. And I can see, take a look at my scopes and the image, and this is just nuance, but this is where you're really starting getting into like, yeah, that's good, but I click that and it's like, wow, the water suddenly just became really rich. You know, I really like that. So that's one of the elements that you have control over. And you can, even to the extent of, that's working with all three colors, so that would be luminance. But if I wanted to, I could say, you know what? I just want to affect the blues. And I click the blue here, and I'll probably end up undoing this because I really don't want to do what I'm about to do. But I could put a little click there, and this will bring down just the blue channel. Now I'm getting a look, and it's a little more golden. Okay? I've created a look, and I could say, you know something, but I don't want that golden to be deep in my shadows. So there we go before. So I'm using this to really get a different feel, and remember, that was the ugly shot that we started with. So working with curves is extremely powerful because it gives you a lot of nuance to work with. I'm going to save, this is a really cool thing. This is a hue saturation curve. I'm going to show this to you in another clip because I really think I'm happy with this and I don't want to mess with it anymore because there's no need to. But we'll show you that in another example. So before, after.